In the weathered town of Dustridge, Montana, where the sky stretched endless over rolling prairie, and the mountains stood sentinel to secrets ancient and new, Eleanor Hayes stood at the edge of the mercantile's loading dock, her reflection wavering in a rain puddle at her feet. The whispers had followed her since childhood, growing louder with each passing year, until they became shouts that echoed through the town's dusty streets. "Too plain," they said, "too gangly. Poor thing'll never find a husband with that face." At 28, unmarried and working at Henderson's general store, she had become the living embodiment of everything people feared their daughters might become. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The bell above the store door chimed, announcing another customer seeking shelter from the sudden downpour. Ellie, as she preferred to be called, grabbed a stack of flour sacks and hurried inside, nearly colliding with Mrs. Pemberton, the town's self-appointed guardian of gossip and propriety. "Gracious child, watch where you're going." Mrs. Pemberton adjusted her black bonnet with theatrical precision, though I suppose with a face like yours, one must rely on speed rather than looks to be useful. Ellie felt the familiar burn of shame creep up her neck, but she kept her eyes downcast, mumbling an apology as she continued toward the storeroom. The sound of spurs jingling on wooden floorboards caught her attention, and she glanced up to see a tall, lean figure standing by the counter. His weathered cowboy hat shadowed his face, but something in his stillness made her pause. "Afternoon," the stranger said, his voice carrying the dusty timbre of trails and campfires. "I'm looking for some supplies. My brother said Henderson's has the best selection this side of the Continental Divide." Mr. Henderson emerged from behind the counter, wiping his hands on his apron. "That we do, sir. What brings you to Dustridge?" "Name's Jacob Whitmore. My brother's spread lies 3 days west of here. I'm taking over his horse-breaking operation while he recovers from an accident." Ellie froze. The Whitmore Ranch was legendary throughout Montana Territory, known for producing the finest horses and riders this side of the Mississippi. She'd heard tales of their skill from traveling merchants, though the family kept mostly to themselves, living far from the main settlements. "Ah, the Whitmore place." Henderson's eyes lit up with the prospect of a good sale. "Heard your brother took quite a spill last month. Shame about his leg." "Comes with the territory," Jacob replied with a slight shrug. "Now, about those supplies." As the two men discussed orders, Ellie found herself studying the newcomer. There was something different about him, something that set him apart from the usual run of cowboys who passed through town. His movements were precise, yet oddly hesitant, and he kept his head tilted slightly, as if listening more intently than necessary. "Ellie!" Henderson called out, breaking her reverie. "Fetch Mr. Whitmore's list. We'll need to fill it before the rain lets up." Heart pounding for reasons she couldn't explain, Ellie approached the counter. Up close she could see that Jacob's eyes were clouded, unfocused, looking past her rather than at her. Recognition dawned slowly, followed by understanding. "Here's the list, sir," she said softly, placing the paper on the counter. Jacob's hand moved toward the sound of her voice, brushing hers as he reached for the paper. He paused, then smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen in what felt like years. "Thank you, miss, though I'm afraid this paper won't do me much good." He tapped the side of his head. "Got caught in a hailstorm 2 years back. Lightning. Struck so close it took my sight, but left everything else intact. Lucky, I suppose." The revelation struck Ellie with unexpected force. Here was someone who couldn't see her, couldn't judge her by the standards that had defined her entire existence. In his presence, for the first time in her life, she felt truly invisible, and paradoxically more seen than ever before. I could read it for you," she offered, her voice barely above a whisper. "That would be mighty kind of you." "Miss Hayes, Ellie Hayes. Well then, Miss Hayes, I'd be grateful for your assistance. As she read through the extensive list of supplies, feed, tack, household goods, and medical provisions, Ellie became aware of how Jacob listened, not just to her words, but to her voice itself. He nodded at appropriate moments, asked clarifying questions, and seemed genuinely interested in her opinions about product quality. "You know a fair bit about horses," he remarked, after she'd suggested a particular type of liniment for his brother's injured leg. "I grew up on a small ranch," she explained, surprised to find herself engaging in actual conversation. "My father passed when I was 12 and we had to sell, but I still remember the horses." "What were their names?" The question caught her off guard. No one had asked about her childhood horses in years. There was Thunder. He was a grey stallion with the spirit of a tornado, and Daisy, my mare. She was gentle as rain, but could outrun any horse in the county when she wanted to. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sounds like you miss them. Every day. Their conversation continued as she helped gather supplies, Jacob asking questions that drew out memories she'd long buried. Stories of early morning rides across dewy fields, of racing her father through creek beds, of the way Daisy would rest her head on Ellie's shoulder when they paused to watch the sunset. By the time they'd assembled Jacob's order, the rain had stopped, leaving the street gleaming like tarnished silver. The familiar clatter of boots on the boardwalk announced the arrival of the Richardson brothers, notorious for their crude humor and wandering hands. "Well, look here, Tom," the eldest Billy sneered as he entered the store. "Henderson's still got his scarecrow working the counter, though I reckon she'd scare off customers rather than crows." "Now, Billy," Henderson began, but Jacob spoke first. "Scarecrow." Jacob's voice carried an edge sharp as winter frost. "From where I stand, I'd say you're the one doing the scaring. Though I suppose when a man feels the need to insult a woman just going about her work, it says far more about his character than hers." Billy's face reddened. "Who's asking you, blind man? Can't even see what we're talking about." "Don't need to," Jacob replied calmly. "I can hear perfectly well. And what I hear is a man too small to find worth in himself, so he takes it from others." The tension in the store thickened like molasses. Tom Richardson placed a hand on his brother's arm, murmuring something about not wanting trouble with the Whitmores. It was common knowledge that the family commanded respect throughout the territory, their connections reaching all the way to the territorial governor. "Come on, Billy," Tom urged. "Let's get going." As the brothers stumbled out, muttering curses under their breath, Jacob turned back toward the counter. "My apologies for the commotion, Mr. Henderson. Some men never learn that a person's value isn't measured by what others see." Ellie stood frozen, her heart threatening to burst from her chest. No one had ever defended her before. No one had ever suggested that she might possess value beyond her appearance, or lack thereof. "Mr. Whitmore," she managed to say, her voice shaking. "Thank you." "Nothing to thank me for, Miss Hayes. Just speaking the truth." Henderson busied himself with the cash register, clearly attempting to pretend the confrontation hadn't happened. "Will you be needing help loading these supplies, Mr. Whitmore?" "Actually," Jacob said, "I was hoping Miss Hayes might accompany me to my wagon. I could use guidance to avoid the worst of the mud puddles, and she's been so helpful already." Ellie's breath caught. To be seen walking with a man, any man, on the streets of Dustridge would set tongues wagging for weeks. But something in Jacob's manner made her feel safe, protected in a way she'd never experienced. Yes, I can help." They stepped out into the afternoon light, now softened by the recent rain. The air smelled of wet earth and fresh beginnings. Jacob offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, Ellie took it, feeling the solid strength beneath his coat sleeve. "Tell me about the town," he requested as they navigated toward his wagon. "What do you see that I can't?" It was such a simple question, yet it opened something within her. As they walked, she began describing everything, the way the sun painted, rainbows in the puddles, how the cottonwood trees swayed like dancers, the determined way a robin tugged at a worm in the softened earth. "Your voice changes when you talk about beautiful things," Jacob observed. "It gets softer, like you're sharing a secret." "I suppose I am," she admitted. "Beauty is the one thing I've always loved, but could never be." They'd reached his wagon, and Jacob turned to face her fully. "Beauty isn't something you can be, Miss Hayes. It's something you recognize, appreciate, and create. From what I've heard in your voice today, you've got more beauty in your little finger than most folks have in their whole being." Tears pricked at her eyes, she who never cried, who had learned that tears only invited more cruelty. "You're just saying that because you can't see me." "No," he said firmly. "I'm saying it because I can hear you. Your kindness, your knowledge, your passion for simple wonders that most people overlook. That's not something eyes reveal, Miss Hayes. That's something only hearts recognize." A dozen responses formed and died on her lips. Instead, she helped him load the last of his supplies, their hands brushing more often than necessary, each touch sending warmth spreading through her chest. "I'll be returning next week for more supplies," Jacob said as he prepared to leave. "The ranch goes through quite a bit, what with all the horses and the hands we employ. I hope you'll be here to help me again." "I'm always here," she replied, then regretted the admission that highlighted her unchanging, unmovable life. "Perhaps," he said, climbing up to the wagon seat with practiced ease, "it's time for some things to change." As his wagon rolled away down the muddy street, Ellie felt a stirring she hadn't experienced since childhood, the whisper of possibility, the first faint notes of hope's symphony. For the first time in years, she wondered if there might be more to her story than the labels others had written for her. Inside the store, Henderson watched through the window. "Interesting fellow, that Whitmore." "Yes," Ellie agreed, her hand still tingling where Jacob had touched it. "You know," Henderson continued, "the Whitmores are said to have a gift for seeing what others miss. There's stories about them training horses that other men gave up on, finding value where others saw only trouble." Ellie considered this, thinking of how Jacob had looked past physical appearances to something deeper. Perhaps his blindness wasn't a limitation, but a different way of seeing, one that revealed truths hidden from eyes accustomed to judging surfaces rather than souls. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine tasks, but Ellie moved through them with newfound energy. For the first time in years, Sunday wasn't just the next day. It was the beginning of a countdown to when Jacob would return. That evening, as she walked home to the small boarding house where she rented a room, Mrs. Collins, her landlady, was sweeping the porch steps. "Heard you caused quite a stir in town today," Mrs. Collins remarked, not bothering with preamble. Ellie's steps faltered. Word travelled fast in Dustridge. "I didn't cause anything. I was just doing my job." "That's not what I heard. Folks say that blind Whitmore fellow came to your defense against the Richardson boys. They were being cruel. He simply spoke up." Mrs. Collins leaned on her broom, studying Ellie with unexpected gentleness. "My dear girl, do you know why they call it defending? Because someone recognized something worth protecting." The words followed Ellie to her room, where she sat at her small mirror for the first time in months. The reflection showed the same long face, the same stern features, the same unruly auburn hair that she'd been criticized for her entire life. But tonight, as she pressed her palm to the glass, she wondered if someone who couldn't see her found her worthy of defense. What did that say about the way she'd learned to see herself? She extinguished the lamp and lay in darkness, listening to the night sounds of Dustridge settling into sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new whispers, perhaps even new encounters. But for tonight, she held close the memory of a voice that spoke of beauty not as something to possess, but as something to recognize. And in that recognition, Ellie Hayes found the first seeds of a hope that would transform not just her own story, but the very way Dustridge understood the meaning of true beauty. Outside her window, the prairie wind carried the scent of rain-washed earth and distant possibilities. Somewhere 3 days west, Jacob Whitmore was likely settling into the rhythms of ranch life, unaware that in a single afternoon he had cracked open a door that had been sealed since Ellie was old enough to understand the word ugly. Tomorrow, the sun would rise on a new day, and for the first time in decades, Ellie found herself eager to see what light might reveal. The following week passed with agonizing slowness for Ellie. Each morning, she arrived at Henderson's General Store with a new knot of anticipation in her chest, wondering if today would be the day Jacob Whitmore returned. On Tuesday, she reorganized the entire fabric section 3 times. On Thursday, she memorized the inventory list down to the last steel nail. By Saturday evening, as she swept the store clean for another closing, she tried to tell herself that his promise to return had been merely polite conversation, nothing more. But Sunday morning brought an unexpected gift. She was arranging the breakfast table at Mrs. Collins' boarding house when a knock at the front door drew the attention of all 6 residents. Eleanor Hayes, a young man in clean work clothes, stood on the threshold, hat in hand. "I'm Thomas Whitmore. My brother Jacob sent me to deliver a message." Ellie's heart stuttered. Is everything all right?" "Yes, ma'am. He's fine. He asked me to let you know there's been a delay. Some flooding washed out bridges west of here, so he can't make it to town this week. But he wanted you to know he'll be in next Saturday for certain, God willing, and the creek don't rise higher." Relief and disappointment warred within her. "Thank you for letting me know." Thomas hesitated, then added, "Ma'am, my brother, he don't usually go out of his way for store clerks. Just thought you should know that." After he left, Ellie found herself the subject of renewed scrutiny from her fellow boarders. Old Mrs. Henshaw, who'd lived at Collins for 15 years, peered at her over her spectacles. "Whitmore men don't waste time on foolishness," she declared. "Something's got that boy's attention." "It's nothing," Ellie protested, her cheeks burning. "He just needs help reading lists, that's all." But that night, alone in her room, she allowed herself to imagine what might happen if it were more than nothing. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. The following days brought unexpected changes to her routine. Mrs. Collins, who had always treated Ellie with distant efficiency, began sharing extra portions at meals and asking about her day. Even Mr. Henderson seemed more considerate, offering her a stool during slack periods and suggesting she take inventory in his air-conditioned office rather than the stuffy storeroom. It was young Becky Martin, however, who delivered the news that would reshape Ellie's understanding of her position in Dustridge society. The girl burst into the store Thursday afternoon, her blonde curls bouncing with excitement. "Oh, Ellie, did you hear? The Whitmores are hosting a gathering next month, the biggest one in years. They're breaking in wild horses for the cavalry, and everyone's invited to watch. Papa says it'll be like a county fair, with races and everything." She paused, biting her lip. "I overheard Mama talking to Mrs. Pemberton. They're saying Jacob Whitmore has been asking questions about you all over town, wanting to know about your character, your family history, everything." Ellie's throat tightened. That's just gossip, Becky." "Maybe, but Mama says the Whitmores never do anything without purpose. She thinks—" Becky leaned in conspiratorially. "She thinks he's sweet on you." The words hung in the air like soap bubbles, fragile and shimmering with possibility. Ellie turned away to straighten already perfectly aligned jars of preserves, her hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Whitmore lost his sight, Becky. Maybe he just needs help with errands, nothing more." But Becky's news proved prophetic. Over the next few days, Ellie noticed subtle changes in how people treated her. Mrs. Pemberton actually nodded in greeting on Monday. The Richardson brothers crossed the street rather than making their usual crude remarks. Even Mayor Hutchins tipped his hat when they passed on Wednesday. Saturday arrived with a spectacular dawn, painting the prairie sky in shades of rose and gold. Ellie had barely finished opening the store when the familiar jingle of spurs announced Jacob's arrival. This time, he wasn't alone. "Miss Hayes," Jacob smiled as he entered. "I hope you don't mind. I brought my brother Thomas to help with the heavy lifting today." "Not at all," she managed, her voice steadier than her heart. Thomas Whitmore proved to be a younger version of Jacob, though his eyes held full sight and constant curiosity. As they moved through the store, Ellie caught him studying her with frank interest that made her uncomfortable. "So you're the one who's got my brother talking about beautiful voices and kindness that shines brighter than sight," Thomas commented when Jacob was examining leather goods by touch. Ellie's face flamed. "I'm sure you misheard." "I don't think so," Thomas grinned. "Jacob's described you in detail to our whole family. Says you have hair like autumn fire and a spirit that could gentle wild horses. You know, our sister Sarah keeps asking when she'll get to meet you." "Thomas," Jacob's voice carried a warning edge, though his lips curved in amusement. Right. I'll just look at those saddles over there." As Jacob's order was being filled, Ellie noticed he'd added several items that hadn't been on previous lists. Fine soaps, ribbons in various colors, even a hand mirror with an intricate silver back. "Gift for someone special?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Could be," he replied quietly, "though I'm told it's traditional to court a lady properly before presenting gifts." Her breath caught. "Courting? Is that such a strange notion? A man finding value in your company, wanting to know you better?" "I'm not." She struggled with words. "People here have always made it clear that I'm not suitable for courting." "People here," Jacob said firmly, "have been looking with broken eyes." The power of his words struck her like a physical blow. Tears threatened, but this time they were different. Not tears of shame, but of something dangerously close to hope. Henderson interrupted their moment. "Your order's ready, Mr. Whitmore. Total comes to $37.15. As Jacob felt for his wallet, Thomas reappeared. "Brother, I've been thinking. Our ranch hand, Big Mike, is getting married next month. We'll need to hire help. Miss Hayes," he turned to her, "Jacob says you know horses. Ever consider working on a ranch again?" I have a position here. One that barely pays you what you're worth." Henderson surprised everyone by interjecting. "Ellie, you're the best clerk I've had in 20 years. But if the Whitmores are offering opportunity, we'd pay double what you make here," Thomas continued, "plus room and board. The work's hard but honest, and you'd be around horses again." Ellie looked between the brothers, her mind whirling. This is all happening so fast. "Some things move at their own pace," Jacob observed, "like rivers finding their path or storms clearing the air. When something's right, speed matters less than direction." The store door jingled again, and Mrs. Pemberton swept in, clearly having timed her arrival for maximum dramatic effect. "Mr. Whitmore, I hope you won't be offended, but as concerned citizens, we feel it's our duty to warn you about certain realities regarding Miss Hayes." Jacob turned toward her voice, his blank eyes somehow conveying more disdain than any glare. "Please enlighten me about these realities, Mrs. Pemberton." "Well, as you can't see for yourself, Miss Hayes, That is, her appearance has always been considered. Unfortunate. We merely want to ensure you're not being taken advantage of due to your condition." The silence that followed could have cut glass. Ellie wished the floor would open and swallow her whole. Then Jacob laughed, a genuine, amused sound that filled the store. "Mrs. Pemberton, I thank you for your concern, but I believe you've misunderstood my condition entirely. I may be blind to faces, but I see truth more clearly than most. I see a woman who knows the difference between quality goods and clever packaging. I see someone who describes colors to a blind man as if painting with words. I see kindness that doesn't need witnesses, intelligence that doesn't need applause, and beauty that doesn't beg for approval." He moved closer to Ellie, finding her hand with practiced ease. "Miss Hayes, I wonder if you'd do me the honor of accompanying me to our ranch gathering next month. It would mean a great deal to have you there." Every eye in the store fixed on Ellie. This was the moment, the fork in the road that would determine everything. All her life, she'd accepted what others saw when they looked at her, but Jacob saw without eyes, heard without judgment, and found beauty where others insisted there was none. "Yes," she whispered, then stronger. "Yes, I would like that very much." Mrs. Pemberton huffed and bustled out, but not before Ellie caught a glimpse of something that might have been approval in the older woman's eyes. Henderson was beaming openly, and Thomas practically radiated satisfaction. As the Whitmore brothers departed with their supplies, Jacob paused at the door. "Miss Hayes, Ellie, the invitation to work at our ranch stands. No pressure, just know that we see your worth, even if others have been blind to it." After they left, Ellie found herself surrounded by an unusual energy. Mr. Henderson suggested she take the afternoon off to consider the opportunity. When she returned to the boarding house, even the normally reserved Mrs. Collins was waiting with fresh-baked cookies and what seemed like genuine interest in her day. That night, as starlight spilled through her small window, Ellie confronted the mirror again. The reflection hadn't changed. Still the same angular face, the same wild hair that refused to be tamed. But something in her own eyes was different. For the first time, she was seeing herself through the lens of someone who valued what truly mattered. She thought about the choice before her. Staying in Dustridge meant safety, predictability, and the gradual change in how people treated her now that she had the Whitmore's interest. But leaving meant stepping into the unknown, trusting in possibilities that terrified as much as they thrilled. The memory of Jacob's touch, the warmth in his voice, the way he described beauty as something felt rather than seen, these became her lullaby. As sleep finally claimed her, Ellie dreamed of wild horses running free across endless meadows, their hoofbeats matching the rhythm of a newly awakened heart. Dawn arrived with a decision crystallized like morning frost. When Henderson unlocked the store, he found Ellie already waiting, a small carpet bag at her feet and determination in her. "Stands. I'm giving my notice, Mr. Henderson. 2 weeks, if that's acceptable." Henderson nodded, no surprise in his weathered face. "Been expecting this since yesterday. You've given me 5 years of loyal service, Ellie. It's time you had your own adventure." The next 14 days passed in a whirlwind of preparation and reflection. True to his word, Thomas Whitmore returned midweek with specific details about the position, not just ranch work, but helping manage the household accounts, organizing supply orders, and assisting with gentling the younger horses. They'd even arranged for her to have her own small cabin on the property, respecting her independence while offering community. News of Ellie's departure spread through Dustridge like a prairie fire. The reactions were as varied as the townspeople themselves. Some, like the aging Dr. Patterson, offered genuine well-wishes and advice about frontier medicine. Others, including, surprisingly, the mayor's wife, admitted they'd misjudged her and apologized for years of silent complicity in the town's casual cruelty. On her final Saturday at the store, Ellie experienced what felt like her own eulogy, except she was alive to hear it. Customer after customer spoke of her patience, her knowledge, her quiet kindness that had made shopping at Henderson's a pleasure rather than a chore. "You know," Old Man Jenkins admitted, "my wife always said you had the prettiest smile in town. Said it was a shame more folks didn't try to see it." Even Becky Martin had grown more thoughtful. "I'm writing about you for my school essay on people who inspire me. Teacher says it's important to recognize courage when we see it." The most unexpected encounter came on Thursday afternoon. She was closing up when Mrs. Pemberton entered alone, minus her usual entourage of gossiping ladies. "Miss Hayes," the old woman began formally, then seemed to struggle with her words. I have not been kind to you. For years I propagated gossip that I now see was not only false, but cruel." She straightened her spine. "My own sister was considered plain by society's standards. She left town, made a life for herself in Seattle, and became a renowned photographer. She captured beauty for others because she understood what it meant to be invisible." Mrs. Pemberton continued, "When she died last year, her journal contained words I should have heeded. Beauty of face is a temporary loan. Beauty of spirit is a permanent fortune. You, Miss Hayes, are wealthy beyond measure in ways that matter." The apology hung between them like a bridge across a chasm. Ellie felt tears prick her eyes, not of sadness, but of healing. "Thank you, Mrs. Pemberton. That means more than you know." "Jacob Whitmore sees truly," the older woman nodded. "In my experience, the Whitmores always find what they're looking for, whether it's in horses or in people." On her final evening, in Dustridge, the boarding house hosted an impromptu farewell dinner. Mrs. Collins, who had cooked for 40 years without a single word of affection, grew misty-eyed as she presented Ellie with her grandmother's recipe book. "These were passed down through 5 generations of strong women," she said gruffly. "Figured you might need them where you're going." As night fell, Ellie packed her few possessions, clothes worn soft from use, books rescued from the general, store's discard box, her mother's Bible, and her father's old cavalry spurs. But the most precious items were intangible. The memories of a blind man's voice describing her worth, the taste of possibility on prairie wind, the sound of her own laughter after years of silence. She stood at her window one last time, looking out over Dustridge. Tomorrow Thomas would come with a wagon to collect her. The day after, she would ride into a new life where her value wouldn't be measured by angles of bone or symmetry of feature, but by the content of her character and the strength of her spirit. A coyote howled in the distance, its lonely call echoing across the prairie. But Ellie didn't feel lonely. For the first time in her 28 years, she felt seen, truly, deeply seen, and found worthy of love. As she extinguished her lamp, she whispered a promise to herself. Never again would she allow others' limited vision to define her landscape. Beauty, she now understood, was found not in mirrors, but in moments of connection. Not in physical form, but in the courage to be yourself. When the world insists you be someone else, the moon rose high over Dustridge, casting silver light on empty streets. Somewhere 3 days west, a blind man might be looking out his own window, perhaps sensing across the distance that something extraordinary was heading his way. Not because he could see it, but because he could feel the truth that his heart had recognized from the first moment he heard her voice. Tomorrow would bring new horizons. But tonight, as dreams of wild horses and gentle hands carried her toward dawn, Ellie Hayes slept soundly, cradled by the certainty that sometimes the greatest adventures begin the moment you stop believing what others say about you and start believing what's been true in your heart all along. In the depths of night, the prairie wind whispered secrets across the sleeping town, tales of transformation, of beauty recognized, of lives about to be forever changed by the simple truth that love, like lightning, strikes hardest when guided by a pure heart rather than seeking eyes. The wagon wheels churned up dust clouds that painted the horizon amber as they left Dustridge behind. Ellie sat beside Thomas Whitmore, her trunk and carpet bag secured in the back, watching the familiar landmarks disappear one by one. The general store grew smaller, then vanished. The boarding house became a speck. Even the church spire, which had dominated the town's skyline for 50 years, eventually surrendered to the vastness of the Montana territory. "Nervous?" Thomas asked, navigating the wagon around a washout from last week's storms. "I'd be lying if I said no," Ellie admitted, "though perhaps terrified would be more accurate." Thomas chuckled. "Ma says the best changes always start with fear. It's how we know we're moving towards something important." As they traveled, Thomas shared stories about the Whitmore ranch, how their father had built it from nothing after the war, how their mother had insisted on planting flowers even when the prairie fought against everything soft and beautiful, how Jacob, before losing his sight, had been the wildest rider in 3 counties, able to gentle horses others deemed unbreakable. "When he lost his sight," Thomas continued, his voice softening, "we all thought he'd fade away. But something funny happened. He started hearing things we'd all missed. The fear in a horse's breathing before it bolted, the hesitation in a rider's commands that spooked their mount. He began training riders as much as horses, teaching them to listen rather than just react." They stopped at noon by a creek shaded by cottonwoods. As Thomas tended to the horses, Ellie gathered wildflowers, Indian paintbrush, lupine, and prairie sage, arranging them on a flat rock just for the joy of seeing beauty organized. She was lost in this simple task when a voice nearby startled her. "Yellow and purple make the prairie sing." She spun around to find an elderly woman emerging from the tree line, carrying a basket of herbs. Her long silver hair was braided with what appeared to be small feathers and beads, and her weathered face spoke of decades spent reading Earth's secrets. "I'm sorry," Ellie stammered. "I didn't know anyone was here." "The land belongs to all who respect it," the woman replied, studying her with ancient, knowing eyes. "You're the one going to the Whitmores." It wasn't a question. Ellie nodded, wondering how news traveled so fast in this vast territory. "I am Morning Star," the woman continued. "My people have known the Whitmores for 3 generations. They are good people who see beyond what most allow themselves to perceive." She approached, examining Ellie's wildflower arrangement. "You have an eye for balance. Colors that fight alone find harmony together. This is wisdom many never learn." Morning Star reached into her basket and withdrew a small bundle of dried herbs. "For Jacob Whitmore. Tell him Morning Star sends blessings, for his eyes that see what others cannot. And for you," she produced a smooth stone, pale blue with veins of white. "Carry this when doubt whispers that old voices speak truth. It will remind you that mountains wear away the words of small-minded people." Before Ellie could respond, Thomas returned with the watered horses. The old woman nodded to him. "Thomas Whitmore, your brother chose well when he chose to see with his heart." She disappeared into the cottonwoods as swiftly as she'd appeared. Thomas watched her go with deep respect. "Morning Star is special," he explained. "Some call her a medicine woman. Some say she's the last keeper of old mountain wisdom. All I know is when she speaks, wise folks listen." They resumed their journey, the afternoon sun painting shadows that grew longer as they approached mountain foothills. Each mile revealed new vistas, valleys carpeted in purple sage, peaks crowned with snow that caught the dying light like beacons. Ellie had never imagined such vastness, such raw beauty. that existed beyond the confining borders of Dustridge. As dusk approached, the ranch finally appeared, not as a single structure but as a small village nestled against a mountain slope. Multiple buildings dotted the landscape, a main house painted white with green shutters, several smaller cabins, enormous barns, corrals that stretched toward infinity. Horses of every color grazed in fenced pastures, their forms silhouetted against the deepening sunset. "Home," Thomas said simply. But Ellie heard volumes in that single word. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the main house where a crowd had gathered. Jacob stood on the porch steps, flanked by a woman who could only be his mother and a younger woman, with a bright smile that rivaled the stars beginning to appear overhead. "Welcome to Whitmore Ranch," Jacob called out, unerringly turning toward the sound of their wagon. "I hope the journey wasn't too taxing." "Not at all," Ellie managed, though her legs trembled as Thomas helped her down. Jacob's mother stepped forward. "I'm Margaret Whitmore, dear. We're so pleased you're here. Jacob hasn't stopped talking about you since his first trip to Dustridge." "Mother," Jacob warned, but his ears reddened. His sister Sarah laughed. "Oh, let me introduce myself properly, since my brother's suddenly gone all shy. I'm Sarah Whitmore, and you must be the miraculous Ellie we've heard so much about. The one who describes colors like poetry and makes flower inventory sound fascinating." Despite her nervousness, Ellie found herself smiling, genuinely smiling, for the first time in the 3 days since leaving Dustridge. "I assure you, flower inventory is rarely fascinating." "Spoken like someone who's never heard Jacob relate your descriptions," Sarah teased. "Come, let me show you to your cabin. It's small but private, with a view of the morning sun you'll never forget." As they walked, Sarah pointed out various buildings and landmarks. The large barn houses, the working horses, the smaller ones for foals and recovering animals. "That cabin by the creek belongs to Big Mike. He's our foreman, and his wife Beth. She's our cook, and you'll love her. The bunkhouse is for seasonal hands." They approached a small log cabin, set slightly apart from the others, surrounded by what appeared to be an attempt at a flower garden. "Jacob asked us to fix this place up special for you. That garden was his idea. He remembered you mentioning missing your mother's sunflowers." Ellie's eyes widened as they drew closer. Someone had indeed planted sunflowers along the cabin's foundation, along with wildflowers that matched those she'd gathered earlier. A rocking chair waited on the tiny porch, positioned to catch both morning sun and evening starlight. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Jacob says beauty is where you create it," Sarah replied. Beth left fresh sheets and towels inside. Suppers. At 6, Ma insists on feeding the whole ranch family together. For now, rest. Tomorrow begins early here. After Sarah left, Ellie explored her new home. The cabin consisted of one large room with a sleeping area, a small kitchen corner, and enough space for a desk and chair positioned by the window. Someone, Jacob, she suspected, had left books on the windowsill, collections of poetry, guides to Montana wildflowers, even a book on astronomy. On the desk lay paper, ink, and pens. She traced her fingers over the smooth wood of the desk, feeling tears threaten again. When had anyone ever considered what might bring her joy? A soft knock interrupted her reverie. "Miss Hayes, it's Jacob. May I come in?" "Of course," she called, quickly wiping her eyes. He entered with the cautious steps of someone navigating an unfamiliar space, using his walking stick to orient himself. "Thomas described the layout to me earlier. Window to the east." "Yes, with the most magnificent view I've ever seen." "I'm told the sunrise here makes strong men weep," he said. "My father used to sit on this very porch every morning, watching the mountains wake up." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Jacob continued, "I wanted to speak with you privately before you meet everyone at supper." The hands They're good people, but ranch life can be rough around the edges. They may test you, not out of meanness, but to see if you'll fit in. I understand. I've faced worse than frontier testing. I know you have, he said softly, which is precisely why I know you'll thrive here. Ellie, may I call you Ellie? Please do. Ellie, I want you to know that coming here to work for us is just the beginning. This gathering next month, it's not just about horses. It's about community, about finding where you belong. And He paused, seeming to gather courage. I hope you'll find you belong here, with us, with me. Her heart stuttered. Jacob, you barely know me. I know your kindness. I know your intelligence. I know your strength survives despite years of people trying to break it. And I know that when I hear your voice, the world makes more sense than it ever has since I lost my sight. He reached out, his hand finding hers with growing familiarity. I also know that rushing things can scare them away, so I won't push. I just want you to know that here you'll be valued for everything you are, not judged for what others think you lack. Before she could respond, voices called from outside, Thomas summoning them to supper. Jacob smiled that warmth-infused smile she was coming to associate with safety itself. We should go. Beth's cooking tends to disappear quickly, and the hands get grumpy when their biscuits vanish. The main house kitchen revealed itself as the heart of the ranch, massive. Wooden table surrounded by mismatched chairs, copper pots hanging from ceiling hooks, the smell of roast beef and fresh bread filling the air. 10 people gathered as dusk painted the windows deep blue. The Whitmore family, Big Mike and his wife Beth, 2 seasonal hands named Charlie and Jim, plus 3 younger men whose introduction flew by Ellie in a blur of names and handshakes. Margaret. Whitmore presided over the organized chaos with practiced ease, directing the flow of serving dishes while maintaining conversations in both English and what sounded like phrases in another language entirely. "Mir speaks enough Cheyenne to trade with the local tribes," Sarah explained when she noticed Ellie's curiosity. Pa insisted, said knowing your neighbors meant knowing their words. Conversation flowed as freely as the food. Stories were shared, plans made, gentle ribbing exchanged. Ellie found herself drawn into discussions about horse breeding, book recommendations, and even a spirited debate about whether the new railroad spur would bring prosperity or problems to the territory. She was surprised to hear her own voice joining in, offering opinions that were received with genuine interest rather than dismissal. When she mentioned her father's training methods for cavalry horses, Big Mike leaned forward intently. "That's exactly what the Army's looking for," he said. "We've got 20 wild mustangs to gentle before their autumn inspection. Your experience could make all the difference." After supper, Jacob touched her arm gently. "Walk with me. I'd like to show you something." They stepped into the Montana night, where stars blazed against black velvet sky with an intensity that stole Ellie's breath. Jacob led her to a corral, where a white horse gleamed ethereal in the moonlight. "This is Dancer," he introduced. "She's blind in one eye, but she's the gentlest horse on the ranch. I've been training her to respond to specific whistles and touches, rather than visual cues. She's teaching the other horses, and me, that different abilities create different excellence." Ellie watched as Jacob approached the horse, whistling softly. Dancer nickered in response. Stepping forward to nuzzle his shoulder, he guided Ellie's hand to the horse's neck. She knows gentleness by touch. Fear makes people, and horses, defensive. But kindness creates trust that transcends sight. As Ellie stroked Dancer's neck, feeling the horse's warmth, Jacob continued, "I've been thinking about offering riding lessons for children with challenges, those who might benefit from learning that limitations don't define abilities. Would you help me? We could create something beautiful together." The word "together" hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. Under the infinite Montana sky, with honest earth beneath their feet and a blind horse teaching. You'd them about new ways of seeing. Ellie felt something fundamental shift within her. "Yeah," she whispered. "I'd like that very much." The following day brought Ellie's first real test. At dawn, she joined the hands in the corral where the mustangs had been gathered. The wild horses skittered and snorted, their eyes rolling white, with fear and suspicion. "They've been running free for generations," Big Mike explained. "Breaking their spirit breaks their value. We need them calm, but keeping their fire." Ellie watched the horses' behavior patterns, noting which animals served as leaders, which were followers, which approached human presence with curiosity rather than terror. She suggested they start with the most curious ones, using grain rewards and patient observation rather than ropes and force. The hands exchanged skeptical glances until Jacob's voice cut through their doubt. "Listen to her. She sees what we're missing." So they did, and miracle by miracle the first horse approached Ellie's outstretched hand, then another. By afternoon, 3 mustangs allowed tentative touches. By sunset, the ranch hands looked at Ellie with newfound respect. "I'll be damned," Charlie muttered, then quickly apologized for his language. "Begging your pardon, Miss Hayes. Just ain't seen horses gentle that quick since." "Since my father," Jacob finished. "Ellie learned from a master. She honors his legacy." That evening, Jacob found Ellie by the creek, watching minnows dart through shafts of fading sunlight. He sat beside her, closer than propriety might dictate, but perfect for the honesty building between them. "I've been blind 2 years, he began suddenly. "In the beginning I was so angry. Angry at God, at the storm, at the lightning itself. I felt my life had ended." He picked up a smooth stone, rolling it between his fingers. "Then I started noticing sounds I'd never heard before. Horses' different heartbeats, rain on various leaves, the way women laugh differently when they're truly happy versus just being polite, and the way people sound when they describe beauty," Ellie added softly. "Exactly," he smiled. "I discovered there were whole conversations happening that seeing people miss entirely. I learned that touch can communicate what words sometimes cannot. I found that in darkness, other lights emerge." He turned toward her voice. "Ellie, in Dustridge, I heard something that called to me like nothing ever has. Your voice carries truth that most people hide. Your kindness extends to flour sacks and ribbons. You appreciate small beauties when others demand grand gestures." His hand found hers. "I want to know your dreams. I want to share mine. I want to show you this ranch at sunrise and hear how you describe mountains painting themselves with morning light. I want—" "Jacob," she interrupted gently, "I need to tell you something." His hand tensed slightly, but didn't withdraw. "I've never been courted," she continued. "I've never been kissed. I've never danced or received flowers or been told I was beautiful. Not because I'm selective or difficult, because no one ever tried. Because the label they gave me as a child became, and no one bothered to look beyond." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know how to do this, how to believe that someone like you could want someone like me." Jacob shifted to face her fully. "Then let me teach you. Let me show you how I see you, through the beauty of your quick wit, the warmth of your laughter, the courage in your voice when you defend what's right. Let me help you understand that the only labels that matter are the ones we write for ourselves." The kiss, when it came, was shy yet sure. A question answered with affirmation, a hope fulfilled through tender contact. It tasted of summer creek, water and wild mountain winds, carrying promises that transcended physical sight into soul recognition. As they parted, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "In the darkness of losing my sight, I found the light to see what really matters. You've shown me I was looking for beauty in all the wrong places with the wrong eyes." The weeks leading to the gathering blurred, by in a whirlwind of preparation and discovery. Ellie settled into ranch rhythm, early mornings with the horses, afternoons helping Margaret with accounts, evenings spent reading to Jacob or listening to him play guitar, his fingers finding melodies that painted stories without words. She learned to milk cows, card wool, and predict weather by studying cloud formations. She discovered strength in her arms from hauling feed, in her back from grooming horses, in her spirit from finally belonging somewhere. The Mustangs continued their transformation under her gentle persistence. By the third week, all 20 could be handled, though they maintained their wild pride. Jacob insisted she lead their presentation at the gathering, recognizing that her connection with the animals had created something magical. "It's not just skill," he told his family during one evening meal. "It's understanding. Ellie recognizes in those horses what she's felt in herself, the longing to be seen for what they truly are, not what fear makes others assume." As the gathering approached, excitement built throughout the ranch. Invitations had been extended to neighboring ranches, military representatives, and indigenous communities who had historically supplied horses to the territory. Even Morning Star would attend, bringing traditional blessings for the new herds. 3 days before the event, Jacob surprised Ellie with a riding habit, not the plain denim worn for work, but divided skirts in deep blue wool with a matched jacket. Sarah helped choose the color. "She says it matches your eyes." "My mother would have loved this," Ellie whispered, running her hands over the fine fabric. "She always insisted on dressing the part of the lady you wish to be, even on laundry days." "Will you dance with me at the gathering?" Jacob asked suddenly. "There'll be music, and I may not see the steps, but I can feel the rhythm." "I've never danced in public," she admitted. "Then we'll make our own rules," he declared. "The best dances are the ones that forget to care who's watching." The morning of the gathering dawned clear and promising. Wagons began arriving before dawn, bringing families from across the territory. Ellie moved through preparations in a daze of purpose, checking final touches on the Mustangs' presentations, ensuring refreshment tables remained stocked, greeting visitors with a confidence she scarcely recognized as her own. When the Dustridge delegation arrived, including Mr. Henderson, Becky Martin's family, and even Mrs. Pemberton, Ellie felt her first moment of true triumph. They stared at her transformation with expressions ranging from amazement to grudging approval. "My word," Mrs. Pemberton murmured, "is that really Ellie Hayes?" "Ellie Whitmore," Jacob corrected firmly, appearing at her side with uncanny timing. Though not officially engaged, his arm around her waist made his intentions clear. "She's the heart and soul of our training program." The demonstrations exceeded all expectations. The Mustangs moved with natural grace under Ellie's guidance, responding to whistles and gestures that proved their intelligence to military men seeking more than broken transportation. When she led the final horse through its paces, a black stallion who had carried himself in to approach humans mere weeks ago, the crowd erupted in applause. As evening fell, lanterns were lit and fiddles tuned. The dancing began with traditional reels that had everyone joining hands across age and social boundaries. When the music shifted to a waltz, Jacob found Ellie despite the crowd. "Our dance?" he asked, offering his hand. She took it without hesitation, allowing him to lead her into the lantern-lit circle. They moved together, not with perfect steps, but with perfect trust, his touch guiding, her voice quietly describing the other dancers' movements, both of them lost in the music and each other. Around them, the community watched with unexpected warmth. Mr. Henderson smiled proudly. Sarah beamed like sunshine. Even Mrs. Pemberton nodded approvingly, finally seeing what Jacob had recognized from the first moment. That true beauty required no sight to be understood, only the courage to look beyond surface assumptions. As the final notes faded, Jacob drew Ellie closer. "I have something to ask you," he whispered, "something important." But before he could continue, Morning Star approached, offering them a small bundle of sage and sweetgrass. "For new beginnings," she said simply, "the mountain spirits celebrate when truth finds its voice." Thunder rumbled in the distance, not threatening, but promising rain to nourish the land after celebration. As the first drops began to fall, the gathering moved toward the ranch house for shelter and continued revelry. In the doorway, Jacob caught Ellie's hand one more time. "The question will keep until we have privacy," he said. "But know this, every step that brought you here was a step toward home, toward me, toward us." The rain fell harder, washing away, dust and hesitation alike. Inside, voices rose in song and story, weaving new narratives to replace old fears. And somewhere in the sound of rain on roof, in the warmth of shared shelter, in the certainty of belonging at last, Ellie Hayes found herself no longer defined by what others refused to see, but celebrated for everything she had always been. The gathering had transformed from a demonstration of horsemanship into a celebration of recognition, where a woman once labeled too ugly for love had proven that the truest beauty lies not in physical form, but in the courage to remain open to possibility, even when the world insists otherwise. Dawn crept over the Montana mountains like a whispered promise, painting snow-capped peaks in shades of rose and gold. Ellie stood on her cabin porch, steam rising from her coffee cup into the crisp morning air. 6 months had passed since the gathering, and the transformation of her life seemed almost too magnificent to believe. Yet here she was, watching the sun illuminate a future she'd never dared to imagine. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention. Jacob appeared atop Shadow, his black Arabian stallion, riding with the confidence of a man who'd made peace with darkness while learning to navigate by touch and trust. He'd been out since before dawn, exercising the horses with a navigation system only he could master, memorized paths, strategically placed wind chimes, and an almost supernatural awareness of his surroundings. "Beautiful morning," he called out as Shadow's hooves stopped at her cabin steps. "How do you know?" she teased, their routine banter now as comfortable as worn leather. "I can feel it," he replied, dismounting with fluid grace. "The air tastes different when sunlight kisses the earth awake." His poetic way of describing the world still caught her breath. She descended the steps to meet him, accepting his kiss with the ease of 6 months' morning rituals. "The Denver Tribune correspondent arrives today," she reminded him. "Sarah organized everything. They're doing a feature on our therapeutic riding program." The program had blossomed beyond anyone's expectations. What began as Jacob's vision for children with disabilities had expanded to include veterans returning from frontier conflicts, elderly ranchers struggling with isolation, even women from nearby towns seeking strength through connection with these magnificent creatures who demanded presence, not perfection. "I've been thinking," Jacob said, his arm finding its familiar place around her waist as they walked to the main house, "about our next expansion. More riders, more teachers. You." His lips curved in that slow smile she'd grown to cherish. "I've watched you transform frightened children into confident horseback riders, help former cavalrymen confront their demons through gentle horsemanship, give lonely widows purpose by caring for these animals. You have a gift, Ellie, that needs sharing on a grander scale." Her heart stuttered. "Jacob, I'm not—" "Don't," he interrupted gently but firmly. "Don't start a sentence with what you think you're not. I've learned to recognize the shapes of self-doubt in your voice, and after 6 months you should trust what I hear." They'd reached the main house, where the familiar chaos of morning meal preparation already bloomed. Margaret flipped pancakes, while Beth stirred gravy and Sarah reviewed the day's schedule with military precision. The photographer's wagon was spotted passing Miller's Ridge, Thomas announced, bursting through the door with his usual energy. "Should arrive before noon." "Perfect." Sarah checked invisible lint from her riding habit. "I want the morning. Session finished, so Ellie can work with the advanced riders when they arrive." "Actually," Jacob interjected, "I was discussing with Ellie about establishing a teaching program, not just for our students, but for new instructors who could carry this work to other ranches, other territories." Margaret's spatula paused mid-flip. "A teaching program for teachers? Why not?" Jacob's enthusiasm kindled. "We've proven these methods work. Why keep them confined to one ranch when they could transform lives across the country?" "It would mean traveling," Sarah pointed out practically, "setting up programs elsewhere, training instructors one-on-one." "We could start small," Ellie found herself saying, caught in Jacob's vision. "Perhaps with ranches in neighboring counties. First, then expand if—" "Not if," Jacob corrected. "When? Because what we've discovered here isn't just about horses or riding. It's about revealing people's hidden strengths, helping them see themselves through clearer eyes." His words resonated with memories still tender from her own transformation. The woman who'd arrived at this ranch carrying decades of defined worthlessness had found not just love, but purpose. A calling that made their private horse whispering seem almost selfish when it could serve so many more. After breakfast, Ellie headed to the training corrals where her morning students waited. 3 children today. Tommy from town, with his twisted leg from a birth accident, Little Bear from the nearby reservation who hadn't spoken since losing his parents, and Rose, a quiet girl of 12 whose family was newly arrived from back east and struggling to adapt to frontier harshness. Each child brought unique challenges. Tommy insisted he couldn't mount because of his leg. Little Bear communicated only through gestures. Rose flinched at every loud sound, every sudden movement. "Remember," Ellie began her standard opening, "horses don't care about words or appearances. They care about intention. They feel confidence, kindness, fear, uncertainty, all the things that matter most." She guided Tommy to Gentle, the oldest mare on the ranch, who stood with saint-like patience. "What if I can mount from here using the fence?" Tommy asked tentatively, the first time he'd offered a solution rather than an excuse. "Show me," Ellie encouraged. With trembling concentration, Tommy positioned himself, swung his good leg over while bracing with his arms, and suddenly sat astride the horse. His whoop of triumph scattered birds from nearby trees. "I did it. Ellie, I actually did it." The joy in his voice drew attention from other ranch hands, who stopped their work to applaud. Big Mike called out, "That's some fine riding there, Tommy." For Little Bear, Ellie introduced brushing as therapy. The boy, who wouldn't speak, found voice through careful strokes on horsehair, eventually singing a soft Cheyenne song that Morning Star had taught him. Rose presented the greatest challenge. Every sound made her jump, neighing horses, creaking saddles, even friendly greetings. Ellie had an inspiration. "Rose, I want you to close your eyes." The girl obeyed reluctantly. "Now listen." "What do you hear?" "Everything," Rose whispered. "It's all so loud. Choose one sound, just one. Make it your friend." Rose concentrated. "The horse is chewing hay. It's nice. Like rain without storms." "Perfect. Now open your eyes, but keep listening to your friend's sound." Slowly, Rose approached the nearest horse, focusing on that gentle chomping. When she touched the animal's neck, she smiled. A real smile, not the frightened grimace Ellie had seen before. "Sometimes," Ellie explained to all 3 children, "the world feels too big, too loud, too scary. But we each have the power to choose what we pay attention to. Horses teach us this every day." Jacob appeared silently during this lesson, leaning against the corral fence as he developed the habit of doing, not to supervise, but to absorb the energy of transformation happening around him. After the children departed with new confidence and plans for tomorrow's lessons, Jacob offered, his arm for their daily ride through the mountain trails. They'd perfected a system. Ellie described the scenery, while Jacob pointed out sounds and scents she might otherwise miss. Today's ride took them higher than usual, following a path Jacob had discovered that led to a hidden meadow, carpeted in wildflowers. "Stop here," he said suddenly, when they reached a spot where the trail widened. He dismounted, then helped her down with familiar ease. "I've been carrying something for weeks now," he began, his voice more serious than usual. "Waiting for the perfect moment, but I've realized every moment with you is perfect." From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a small box. Opening it revealed a ring, not elaborate or store-bought, but handcrafted from Montana silver, set with a turquoise stone, the color of summer skies. "Thomas made it," Jacob explained. "I felt every detail described exactly what I wanted. Turquoise, to match the fierce loyalty of your spirit. Silver, strong enough to withstand any storm, yet malleable, enough to grow with our love." Ellie's breath caught as he continued. "I may not see your face, but I know its contours through touch. I can't watch you move, but I hear grace in every step. I missed your beauty my whole life without knowing it existed, yet now I can't imagine existence without it filling every day." He held out the ring. "Ellie Hayes, will you continue teaching me about true beauty? Will you share this life of helping others see their own worth? Will you marry me?" The yes came through tears. She didn't bother hiding, tears of joy so pure they seemed to wash away every hurt word ever spoken, every cruel glance ever endured. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her close. "I have a confession," he murmured against her hair. "That first day in the store, I actually could find my wagon perfectly well. Thomas told me later I was being as obvious as a prairie dog on bare ground." She pulled back slightly. "You pretended to need help. I heard something in your voice, strength wrapped in sadness, beauty disguised as duty. I had to know more. So you tricked me." "I courted you," he corrected, with whatever tools were available to a man who couldn't flash handsome smiles or swagger in the street. Her laughter rang across the meadow. "You're dreadful." "I'm yours," he replied, "which makes me remarkable by association." They returned to the ranch to find the Tribune photographer had arrived, a woman named Clara Whitman, who immediately charmed everyone with her efficient warmth and lack of pretension. "I've covered stories from the Amazon to Alaska," she told them over lunch. "But what you're doing here, it's revolutionary. Using horses as healers, creating independence through interdependence. This is the American spirit at its finest." The afternoon photo session captured moments both staged and candid. Jacob demonstrating his whistle command system, Ellie working. With Rose, who had become visibly more confident, the entire family gathered on the main house porch where hung Morningstar's blessing bundle. "Tell me," Clara said to Jacob during a quiet moment, "how does a man who cannot see become an expert in visual harmony, selecting horse and rider combinations that look perfect together?" "Harmony isn't visual," Jacob replied. "It's the syncing of heartbeats, the matching of breath, the invisible dance of trust. I hear what others see, and sometimes that reveals truer beauty." That evening, as the Whitmores and their staff shared dinner with Clara, conversation flowed beyond horse training into philosophy, women's rights, and the changing frontier. "The railroad's changing everything," Thomas mused. "Cities are waking up to possibilities beyond their borders." "Exactly why your training program needs wider reach," Clara agreed. "I'd like to propose something. A series of features, not just about your ranch, but about the broader movement. Women gaining independence through skill, veterans finding peace, children discovering strength, told through the lens of horse therapy." She turned to Ellie directly. "I understand you're developing instructor training. Could this program change how society views therapeutic riding entirely?" Ellie glanced at Jacob, finding strength in his knowing smile. We believe it already has. Every person who finds courage here becomes a teacher themselves, showing others what's possible through compassion and patience. Then let's show the world, Clara declared, raising her glass, to new perspectives and the courage to share them. The toast was interrupted by a commotion outside, horses neighing urgently, the distinct sound of a rider approaching at dangerous speed. Thomas rushed out, returning moments later with news that transformed the evening's joy into purpose. "Storm hit the reservation," he announced grimly. "Flash flooding took out 2 cabins. Morning Star's nephew sent word. They need medical supplies and clothing. He's riding ahead, but we should prepare for more refugees by morning." The mood shifted, instantly from celebration to mobilization. Margaret began organizing medical supplies, while Beth listed food provisions. Sarah pulled out blankets and spare clothing. Jacob whistled for farmhands to ready emergency wagons. "I can help pack medical kits," Ellie offered, remembering basics. Frontier medicine from helping her father treat cavalry horses. "And I'll document this," Clara said firmly, "not for the Tribune, but to create a record. When communities support each other, it builds inspiration for others to follow." They worked through the night, preparing supplies and accommodations for displaced families. By dawn, 7 families had arrived, elders, parents, and children, grateful for shelter, but worried about their future. Ellie found herself particularly drawn to a young mother, barely 16, whose baby had fallen ill from exposure to cold rain. Using knowledge gained from ranch veterinary work and Clara's medical kit, she helped assess the infant's condition. "Dehydration and mild hypothermia," she diagnosed. "We'll keep him warm and get fluids in him. He should improve quickly." The mother's eyes welled with relief. "You are a healer." "I'm learning," Ellie responded honestly, "from horses, from people who care, from necessity." "The old ones say learning never ends for those who serve others," the young mother observed. Her words resonated deeply. Ellie was still learning. About love, about strength, about the countless ways one soul can help another. The label "too ugly" that had once defined her had dissolved like morning mist, replaced by roles she never imagined possible. Healer, teacher, bridge builder between worlds. Over the following week, as the reservation recovered and families began returning home, the ranch transformed into something beyond a place of business or even healing. It became a living example of community resilience. Morning Star arrived with the final group returning home, carrying fresh herbs and renewed energy. She found Ellie in the kitchen, preparing food for those remaining. "I knew the first time I met you," the elder said simply. "Some people carry storm energy. They bring change, wash away old ways, make space for new growth." "I bring trouble, you mean?" Ellie smiled. "I mean transformation." Morning Star touched the turquoise ring on Ellie's finger. "This stone remembers rain and sky, earth and fire. Like you, it has learned to hold beauty through every element." The reservation's recovery sparked conversations about creating a permanent medical outpost, combining traditional native healing with frontier medicine, staffed by volunteers trained at the ranch. The project aligned perfectly with expanding their therapeutic program. "We're building something bigger than horses," Jacob reflected one evening as they sat on the porch, the distant sound of recovering families drifting through cool air. "We're proving that strength multiplies when shared, that communities heal through connection, not isolation." "When I arrived here," Ellie mused, "I thought I was running from labels. Now I see I was running toward purpose." 2 months after their engagement, with therapeutic riding expanding to 3 neighboring ranches and applications arriving for instructor training, Ellie and Jacob married beneath a bower of pine and wildflowers. Morning Star performed the ceremony alongside the local minister, weaving Cheyenne blessing songs with Christian vows. Two paths becoming one, Morning Star intoned, not erasing their separate journeys, but creating new direction together. The reception drew attendees from miles around, former students, community members, even Mrs. Pemberton, who presented Ellie with an antique cameo and a tearful apology for years of blindness. "I see now," the old woman admitted. "Beauty isn't measured in features, but in the space between hearts where compassion lives." As evening settled and dancing began, Clara captured candid moments, Tommy spinning joyfully on one leg, Little Bear teaching ranch children Cheyenne songs, Rose confidently leading her horse in a demonstration for impressed visitors. The evening's unexpected highlight came when a delegation from the state capitol arrived with an extraordinary proposal. The Secretary of Agriculture offered Jacob and Ellie positions establishing therapeutic riding programs throughout Montana Territory, with government support for training facilities and instructor certification. "Your work has reached beyond these mountains," he explained. "The military reports significant improvement in veterans receiving your treatment. Children's welfare agencies document confidence building that changes families. Medical journals publish papers citing your methods." Jacob and Ellie exchanged glances, communication requiring no words after months of growing together. "We'll consider it," Jacob responded diplomatically. "Our heart remains with this community, but if we can extend our reach while maintaining integrity." The offer sparked spirited discussion lasting well into the night. Some saw expansion as betraying the personal touch that made their program special. Others argued that limiting impact meant limiting help for those who needed it most. Ellie found herself navigating these waters with newfound confidence. "What if," she proposed at breakfast the next morning, her voice carrying authority, "earned through experience, we create a hub-and-spoke system. Our ranch remains the main training center, but we develop satellite programs that maintain our values while serving broader populations." "Hub and spoke?" Sarah looked intrigued. "Like wagon wheels," Ellie explained. "Strong center, supporting multiple points of contact. We could train instructors who return to their regions, establish standards while adapting to local needs, create a network of support that strengthens rather than dilutes our mission." Jacob's hand found hers across the table. "Practical wisdom, meeting visionary purpose. This is why I married you. You see solutions where others see only problems." The plan gained momentum. Within a month, pilot programs launched in 3 locations: a veterans hospital near Fort Benton, a school for deaf children in Helena, and a community center in Butte serving immigrant families adjusting to American life. Ellie discovered talents she hadn't known she possessed. Organizational skills honed through years of store management now applied to program development. Natural teaching ability enhanced by empathy earned through hardship. Leadership that emerged when purpose demanded. Courage. 6 months into their marriage, as snow painted the Montana landscape in crystalline silence, Ellie and Jacob reviewed their first official progress report. 23 certified instructors, 47 ongoing therapeutic programs, hundreds of lives transformed. "Remember," Jacob said, fingertips tracing the Braille version of the report, "when you first arrived and thought you were here to work with horses. And you're blind to surfaces but see everything that matters," she responded, their private joke carrying deeper truth. "We've created something that changes how people see disability, how they experience healing, how they understand beauty itself." A knock interrupted their reflection. Thomas entered with news that Mrs. Henderson from Dustridge had arrived unexpectedly with a wagon full of winter supplies for reservation families. "She brought something special," Thomas said, holding up a carefully wrapped package. Said it belonged to your mother, Ellie. Found it when cleaning out the store's attic. Inside the package lay a set of sketches, delicate drawings of horses and children, labeled in faded ink with notes about gentling techniques and training observations. Her father's work, preserved by the store owner who'd recognized their value. Your father was teaching horses to teach humans, Jacob realized, running sensitive fingers over the textured paper. You've completed a circle, he began. Evening brought another surprise. A letter from the University of Montana's medical faculty. Dr. Elizabeth Blackwell herself, pioneering female physician, had read Clara's Tribune series and wanted to study their integration of equine therapy with psychological healing. The medical establishment is waking up to animal therapy, Ellie read aloud. They want to document how horses mirror human emotional states, how riding requires present-moment awareness that heals trauma, how achieving physical balance restores mental equilibrium. Validation, Jacob mused. Though we've always known these truths. We knew them in our hearts, Ellie corrected. Now science is learning to measure what wisdom has always understood. As Christmas approached, the ranch glittered with preparations. Clara returned with completed article proofs showing therapeutic riding's transformation from experimental program to established practice. The photographs captured moments that transcended mere illustration. They told stories of redemption, courage, and connection. One photo particularly struck Ellie, herself leading a group of riders, her face radiant with purpose, Jacob standing nearby with that listening stillness that spoke of complete presence. In the background, Morningstar watched with knowing approval while former students assisted newer ones. Look at this caption, Clara pointed proudly. Love opens eyes in a Montana horse whisperer who teaches that beauty, like strength, grows exponentially when shared. The year ended with a gathering that rivaled their first. Representatives from nationwide therapeutic riding programs came to observe methods that had proven so successful. Former students returned as confident adults ready to give back. Dustridge sent a delegation led by the mayor himself, offering official recognition for transforming lives beyond town borders. Late on New Year's Eve, Ellie and Jacob climbed to their favorite meadow spot, now snow-covered and silent. They'd developed a tradition of sharing hopes for each coming year. You go first, Ellie urged, settled within Jacob's arms against a fallen log. I hope, he began slowly, that we never forget how far you've traveled. That woman who arrived here carrying shame now lights paths for others lost in darkness. That's not just transformation, that's transcendence. You saw me when I couldn't see myself, she acknowledged. Your blindness became my clearest vision, and taught me that sometimes not seeing physical details allows deeper truths to emerge. We've both learned to look beyond surfaces. My turn, Ellie said softly. I hope we remember that love isn't about changing people to fit expectations, but recognizing who they've always been. Every person we help remembers this. Every horse we gentle proves it true. A shooting star arced across the Montana sky. Bright, brief, perfect. Make a wish, Jacob urged. I don't need to, Ellie replied. Everything I could have wished for is right here. As midnight approached, distant bells rang from the ranch house. They descended through crystalline air toward warmth and light, their footprints marking new paths in pristine snow. Proof that courage and love create trails others can follow. The future stretched endlessly before them, full of students yet to teach, horses yet to gentle, hearts yet to heal. The girl once called too ugly to be a proper wife had become a woman whose beauty radiated through every life she touched. And the man who couldn't see faces had found the vision to help others discover their own magnificence. In the distance, Horses called to each other across snow-covered meadows, guardians of ancient wisdom that taught humans how to see beyond limitation into possibility. Ellie and Jacob walked hand in hand toward tomorrow, proof that sometimes the most profound transformations begin when we choose to look past what we've been told to see and discover what our hearts have always known was true. The prairie wind sang through pine trees like a choir celebrating redemption, how beauty, real beauty, emerges not from perfect features, but from perfect love, freely given and gratefully received. In Montana territory where mountains stand, eternal and spirits soar free, their story would be told for generations of a blind man who saw truth, a wounded woman who found strength, and the magic that happens when two souls recognize their reflection in each other's courage. And somewhere in the distance, Morning Star smiled. Knowing that healing circles never truly end, they expand to embrace new generations who will carry the light forward into tomorrow's dawn. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.